Hey guys, a little video on the internals of a marine gearbox. This particular unit is a PRM 120D2, so it's the mechanical box that the PRM range do. There's the casing for it. This is a second-hand unit. Now, I'm installing a brand new Beta 30 for a customer, and they're going to have this gearbox to go on. I got the box off of a trusted source, no problems at all. The clutch has failed in it. So that's, I'm in the middle of changing that. That's already in there. But I wanted to show you these clutches and a couple of things you need to know when using them. The engineering on these things are absolutely elegant. They're beautiful bits of machinery, fabulous little gearboxes, and they're different to the hydraulically actuated boxes that a lot of you will have. I'll cover hydraulic versions in another video so we don't get confused. So this is basically the output shaft of the gearbox. So this is where the clutch is, and yes, I know it's an unknown entity, but a lot of people are unaware that there are clutches in marine gearboxes. You need to be able to disengage the drive from the engine to the transmission, and the way they do that can be numerous. Now this particular type of gearbox has got this amazing machining. I don't know if you can see down that. It's like rifling. If you're not sure what rifling is, inside a barrel of a gun, you've got this beautiful pattern that allows the bullet to spiral, and that helps it with accuracy. Now, bear with me a second. I appreciate this is not a gun, this is a gearbox. So I'm going to pull this apart and just show you something here. So what we've got here is the ahead and reverse gear and the clutch mechanism in the middle, which allows the two to become activated. So basically, these gears and the one I've just taken off will spin freely, yeah? And when they're spinning freely, you're in neutral. So you could free spin the propeller shaft, no problems at all. But inside the box, you've got this little rod here, and that floats on there. So this whole lot can spin, and that rod will just sit there like that. This is part of that same mechanism. It's that way around, sorry. There's a spring in there which keeps it under tension, and that's all that sort of stuff, right? This piece is the casing, which goes on the side of the box. And then you've got your lever, which you should all be familiar with, because that's on the outside, and you go click up, the neutral, click down, and it'll be either ahead or stern, or forward and backwards. So what's happening is the engine is delivering power into the gearbox. I'll show you the input shaft in a sec. You can see just the back here. So that's always spinning no matter what happens, right? It's always going clockwise from the engine front view, or anti-clockwise from the flywheel point of view. So that's always coming in and delivering power all the time until you activate the clutch. Now, when you select the lever, what's happening is this little clutch pack here is spinning on the shaft, but not free to spin. It's got this beautiful spiral pattern. I'm going to withdraw this a bit and show you. So it comes right back, and you can probably make out this absolutely gorgeous machining in it. I'm not a machinist, and I've tried to find out what that's called, and I'm struggling to find out. So maybe there's a machinist that can tell us what that's called. I've called it Helical Gear. I know that's not the right term, or spiral gear. I really want to find that source and share that with you, but it's something that I'm not familiar with. Now, the reason this is so cool, I'll show you why. Just to clarify a couple of things, clutches are mechanisms that will engage part of the gearing to deliver power from one point to another point. With a car, you put your foot on the clutch, that breaks the connection from the flywheel clutch to gearbox, so that there's nothing spinning in the gearbox, and that allows you to change gear. The only bit that'll be spinning is the part that's in gear, and then there's lots of synchro meshes and other things to allow it to go into gear smoothly. Not quite the same with this particular box. Has this cone clutch. As you can see, this old one, all the materials come off of it now, whereas this one is nice and shiny new. It's got a brand new band of material on it, and that will actually absorb ATF fluid. So these boxes use ATF, they don't use engine oil, and the ATF fluid is crushed under incredible pressures and trapped, and that creates a film. And as you select, let's say you select one way, that will travel into the cone here and grab it, and then it starts spinning that gear, and that's then giving you, drive either ahead or stern. I can't remember which way around it is at the minute. Basically, centrifugal force spinning will help this stay engaged, and it's absolutely amazing just the way they do it. So then when you then select neutral, it will come back out slightly to disengage, and then that will free spin. And then I'll put this gear, let me put this other gear on there for you to show you how this other one works. So, excuse me, trying to do things on camera is always a bit fiddly, I find, and one's body doesn't always respond as you want it to. So, right. So these gears float on needle bearings. There's a little cage in there, and then there's a thrust plate at the back, and then you've got these great taper bearings, and these are for thrust, and they can handle forces back and forwards, which is what you get with a boat, obviously. Right, I'll try and demonstrate a little bit of what we've got going on here. As we do this here. Well, I can't even come back in a second because it's going to get complicated. I might just put it in the case and show you. So basically the clutch, right. So if you select it, this clutch is rolling slightly, rolling that way, either that way or that way. It can't free spin like this on the spot. It has to go forward or has to go backwards. And that travel is what engages your drive. So the cone here, you see a very slight movement because it's very fine tolerances. So as that comes back, bear in mind that I've got the main bearing at the back here and the locking nut off the back, so this is going to move a bit more than it should do. But the principle, basically, once that grabs it, that starts to spin. Okay, so that will give you drive in one direction. Right, you following me how this works? It's very clever. When you come back to neutral, that centre hub will then go free again, yeah, and the two can spin independently. But when you then bring that all the way back, that will then start to spin the other direction. Now, because of the way the spiral gear in on that output shaft is designed, that action is biting and it's keeping a reasonable amount of force on the receiving hub and delivering power. It's using all of the mechanism of the natural transmission of power through the gears to keep things in check. Now, there's a different system on some of the hydraulic boxes, and a lot of you will have the old Hearth boxes, like the HBW 100. Now, they're very different inside. They're nothing like this at all. They do have the gears and the input shaft and that stuff, but they have a wet multi-plate clutch. There's a whole little cage, and it's about this big, and there's lots of plates inside. I know this is not a very good demonstration, but they're round discs. You've got drive plates and friction plates. Now, they're all interlaced, so there's one after the other, one after the other, and the one set of plates is driven from the outside and the other ones receive power from the inside, so they can free spin when there's not a clamping force on the cage. So oil trapped in it, it's lubricating, that sort of stuff. So you're relying on spring force to keep the clutch pack in check. And if you've ever done the trick of grabbing like a phone book and you lay each sheet on top of each other, two phone books together like that, and then you try pulling them apart, friction, it's amazing how strong that is. That's a good bit of fun to try, actually. Get an old phone book, if one still exists, and lay across the paper like that and do loads and loads and loads, and you'll find how amazing friction is. So this is slightly different. It is using friction to keep the clutch in check, and this stops it slipping. But I just thought I'd show you the insides of these. It's absolutely clever the way they designed it. Whoever designed this is very cool. I'll try and find out who the engineer was and put a little label up. But just this, let me take this off again and show you. I'm proper geeking out now because I love this sort of stuff. It really floats my boat. And yes, I meant a pun, you know. So, so as you can see, I can't free, like if I take that off the gear, I can free spin it now. But to engage it, my spinning action is causing that to go backwards and forwards, yeah? And that actually engages the drive. What a fabulous piece of engineering. So this is your input shaft, this one here. It would be the other way around. So your, let me zoom out a little bit here if I can, just by bringing the camera up. So your engine would be at this end, your flywheel would be there, your drive plate would be here. This would engage inside the flywheel like that, and then that would always be spinning with the engine, because the engine, engines always spin, unlike say electric drive. But again, that's another conversation. So this is always delivering power, and then you've got the gear up here, which is this is the idler, and that will deliver the reversing power. So rather than, so what you've got, this sits inside the hub, and then this will drive on there, and it'll be offset to one side, something like this, and then basically this gear will interact with this other gear, and then depending on which one locks up, which one of these hubs lock up, that will give you a head and reverse. Sorry if it's not as clear as that. I'm just trying to show you the clutch on these. Now, this is a really important thing for you to know. As with all gearboxes, whether you're on a boat or a car or a truck, but this is especially important for marine stuff, because I actually had to repair one of these for someone else recently, and it was basically a new box. I think it was a year old. When you go from neutral to a drive, whether it's reverse or forward, everything's going to engage and it's going to do its thing if it's all working fine, and that's fine. If you have a concern which means you need to go from a head to a stern, or from a stern to a head really quickly, you need to pause no matter what you do. If you just go from one way to the other really fast, what happens is this will slam in, and it will slam so hard it starts to strip the main friction material off the cone, off the clutch here. And also, consequently, with the other box I had to repair, it kind of mauled up the ends of these ways, and it stopped this actually travelling correctly all the way into the actual gear, and there was no head or a stern properly. It was kind of getting caught up and bound up. Now I managed to fix it for them and didn't need a new clutch. The material was all right on it, but it just take a good old wallop, and I think it was like full whack forward and suddenly whack into reverse. It was a real thump. But I took it apart and cleaned it all up, and I managed to kind of sort all these ways out and polish it all up, and I sorted the shaft out as well. So they were very lucky, didn't need a new clutch, because these clutches are about 200 quid, they're not cheap. But everything else in this box is still in mint condition. There's nothing that really is a problem. All the bearings are still in tip-top condition. The selector barrel here, I'll give that a little polish with some really fine polishing materials, just to make it slide a bit better in there. I've already wire brushed everything just to clean all the muck off the external parts, and I've cleaned and degreased everything, so it's all dry. This one's a bit oily though, because it's no point cleaning that. But I just thought I'd show you these, because I know a lot of people don't necessarily have the understanding of the insides. So like I say, no matter what kind of box you've got, don't go from a head to a stern or a stern to a head really quickly. You need to wait for the propeller just to come to a brief stop. I appreciate on fast rivers that may not necessarily happen, and you have to do what you have to do, but you don't want to be having an object spinning really quickly one way and then you're asking for it to stop and change direction. The laws of physics determine that it takes a lot of energy to make something do something, such as say you're on a bicycle and you've got to start out again, you've got to really stand up and pedal to get that momentum going. Once you've got that momentum going, the natural inclination of all that mass of you and the bike and everything else wants to keep going. It's friction and the terrain that slows you down. So if you then want to apply a means to stop, you've got to apply the brake to the bicycle. That will then clamp on the hub or the disc, whatever system you might have, and you're then transferring the momentum energy into a friction energy into heat and dissipating it, and that's how you slow down. So if you're trying to use your clutch as a brake to stop your propeller shaft from spinning really quickly, it's going to take a knock. It's going to take, it's going to get really hot and strip itself. It's not designed for that. It's designed to simply engage the power, the torque from the engine, and deliver propulsion. So ideally, you want to allow just a brief pause for things to slow down, and then you will go click gently into the minimum revs and allow you to then bring up the revs. And once you're engaged, you can go full whack again, by all means, if it's safe to do so. Curiously, in case anyone wonders, if you're a driver, you will know that when you're moving, you can't engage the reverse gear because of the way that the gearbox is built and designed. You're literally forcing gears to try and mesh together, and you're going to strip those gears if you're not careful. So you need to come to a complete stop and then have a brief period of just before you change gear. I know this is not a car, but there have been occasions where people put van gearboxes on boats and it doesn't work. It's hilarious, but it's they get damaged quite quick. So anyway, there's a PRM mechanical. I will show you a little clip in a sec once I've reassembled it, and I'll show you the actual operation of how it operates, because I can do that by hand. But yeah, so beautiful piece of engineering. I believe these are made in the UK. The company's definitely a UK company, and I still believe that we make them here, which is a fabulous thing for us here in the UK. And I know these are world renowned, and they don't need me to say that. Thanks very much. Right, I'm attempting to show you how this works. I appreciate that it's made it as clear as you like. So here's your input shaft. That travels all the way down. The rear casing obviously would be shrouding all this, and that would support the rear bearing. This shaft here, the idler shaft, and the gear that delivers reverse to the output shaft. So this has this coupling at the back, which you will all be familiar with because that's on the outside, and that's what will drive the propeller. The selecting mechanism will be on this side, and that would integrate into here. So let me attempt to do this. Unfortunately, I don't have the best place to put the camera. If I put the casing down here, maybe this will work. Let's have a look here. So I've got to try and support this. I don't want to drop it all. So basically, the engine's going to be delivering power into this all the time. Yeah, so when it's running and ticking over, that's what's going in. You have to actuate one of the mechanisms. So up or down will deliver this cone mechanism, as I said, into it. So I get it to engage and stay in place. Unfortunately, it's a bit difficult to do by hand. Now you can see the output shaft is now rotating. I don't know if you can make that out or not. Yeah. So that's now going to be giving us, I think that's reverse gear, because the power's coming from the shaft down through this and into. No, I stand correct. Sorry, no, this is actually forward. It's going ahead. So power's coming through the input shaft. It's being delivered at this gear into this gear here because the clutch is locked onto it, and this is what's making the output shaft spin. Okay, so if I go to neutral, just all you do then is you disengage that, and suddenly now the output shaft is no longer spinning. Okay, if we bring the clutch in the other direction, that should give us reverse. There you go. So now power's coming in the input shaft, it's going onto the reverse idler gear here. This gear is now taking power from this input shaft and bringing it to the bottom gear on here, and that will allow, because the clutch is engaged, the clutch is driving the main shaft off this gear. So power's coming from the input shaft, idler gear, into the reverse gear, into the clutch. The clutch is fixed onto the output shaft, and that will then, if I can get it to stay in place, it's then causing the output shaft to reverse. I'll do it again with the casing on, just want to show you the internals. Right, so gearbox is now assembled. Basically, the engine will deliver power constantly into the shaft. When the engine runs, it will idle, it will tick over, it's going tick, 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 or whatever the sound of the engine might be. Modern internal combustion engines, old internal combustion engines, they run constantly. Modern cars have stop-start technology. It's to save fuel, to save the planet. Okay, but we won't talk about that. So basically this is constantly being rotated when the engine's running, and that's delivering power into the workings of the gearbox. But because the cone clutch hasn't been selected, let me just grab the old one. So obviously this old clutch is dead, but in the middle of here, right behind this selector arm, is the piece that floats in it, and that's just sitting there. The input shaft is spinning and delivering power to the internal workings, but until the clutch is either selected one way or selected the other way, you won't get positive drive. Okay, basically you then would select the arm and that would engage the clutch. Now bear in mind I can't do that with one hand and film, so but you can see now the output flange is now spinning one way. Okay, so now let's say you're spinning, you want to stop, so then you go into neutral and then you just sort of float into where you're going, and then you've got no movement on the shaft. And that, bear in mind, that's now able to spin freely. Okay, that can do its own thing if need be. When you're yachting, I suppose that would be more relevant then, but nonetheless. So then you would change direction, you go the other way, and then that would engage the different gears inside, and the clutch would travel to a different direction to give you an opposite direction. So I'll hold it there. So that's up. Neutral, pause, allow the propeller shaft to stop. Change direction, there you go. Very, very simple boxes, but engineered, absolutely beautiful engineering. I think they're a very clever system because it's not depending purely on friction system to keep the clutch engaged. It's using the energy from the rotational parts of the gearbox to keep a positive actuation. Now, it's not, arguably the clutch is not a positively driven thing because it could slip. Positive drive means something that's interlocking with something else. So gears are a positive drive. A V-belt is not a positive drive. It could slip. A timing belt or timing chain on an engine, that's a positively driven thing. So I just want to clarify that. So if I've made any mistakes, point them out and I'll address them. But I hope that's sort of helped you understand this box and why it's really important to allow a pause between a head and a stern. Because if you don't, you could literally strip your clutch and it gets expensive. Thanks very much.